On today's show, the San Diego Padres start off their series against a potential team they could see in the World Series. I don't know, the Houston Astros with a W thanks to Yu Darvish having one of his most exciting starts since coming off the IL. Luis Arraez being a dog. Justin Merrill continue to stat pad. That selfish fool. Just kidding, of course. And going into a lot more stuff because this is a Padres podcast, so we got to talk about a lot of stuff. Duh. And it's always going to be fun. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, September 17th. As always, I am your host, with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Arraez. You might be familiar with my other baseball-related work outside this podcast over at justbaseball.com, a fantastic website where I do some writing over there. And also check out my other podcast for them called Baseball versus the World. We were just doing a topic, a very silly topic, about which teams, what movie best represents the current state of every team. And tomorrow's episode, we're doing the National League teams, so we'll be doing Padres as well. But really fun show. Go check that out. And I, of course, can be found on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or at @LO_Padres. I mostly tweet about the Padres, but if you only want the Padres like data and updates on the show, check out the Padres account. Today's show, guys, we are recapping last night's game and going into a couple listener questions and whatnot, and going into some little vibes, some vibe talk, dare I say, looking into the playoff rotation and stuff like that. This has been just such an amazing stretch for this team that I think that it's just really, I don't know, man. It's magical. And we're going to talk about that. But first, let's begin recapping last night's game. The Padres win by a final score of 3-1. And that mainly is because of one Sir Yu Darvish. And by the way, the Astros, here's the thing. This is not the best incarnation of an Astros team that we've seen over the years. The Astros have been very good since basically 2016, 2017, right? Everybody knows this, especially the people who hate them, which is, frankly, these days, not as many people as like 2020. 2020 was really like the apex of hating the Astros, but nowadays, still a lot of people hate them for obvious reasons that we won't be getting into. But the Astros are still a very solid team that every year finds a way, not just into the playoffs, but to make a decently long playoff run. Like, that's just what they do. So this is a team that in a big sort of situation, when things are on the line, you worry about them, right? So it's really cool to see the Padres start off this series with a W. And Yu Darvish was excellent. Perhaps his best start since coming off the IL. I don't even think perhaps it is his best start since coming off the IL. He's only had 3, of course. He goes 6 innings in this one, gives up no earned runs, only 3 hits, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts. I think his sinker looked particularly good here. I think his sweeper was pretty on point. And his four-seam fastball, at the very minimum, the velocity was really good in this one, 95.9, his max. So he was hitting there with the velo. That was good. His velocity on his curveball was a little bit down. I don't know if that was a strategic sort of thing because it was a curve and off-speed pitch, but all in all, he looks great. And especially against the team that he, there's a little bit of a revenge vibe. And I say that because for those who don't remember, and that's why I started off mentioning and alluding to the Astros kind of cheating scandal, is that Yu Darvish famously was on the Dodgers in that 2017 season and was dreadful in the postseason. And I believe it was against the Astros that he was dreadful. Completely blows up. They really needed him and he didn't show up. Of course, the Dodgers fans love blaming him for that, as if he's the only player that has been a Dodger that has completely choked in the postseason. So that's hilarious that they love dogging him sometimes. Like, oh yeah, Darvish really did it for us. It's like, neither Kershaw, neither Mookie Betts last year, neither did Freddie Freeman last year, neither did any assortment of guys for you. Anyway, don't want to turn this into a Dodgers hate podcast, but I think that every time I have to imagine, I have to assume, maybe a little bit presumptuous of me, I don't care, that Darvish really likes to show up against the Astros because of what happened in 2017, kind of humiliating him and being so bad and, just getting dragged through the mud after that series. And you can look up, I actually recommend going to look up Andy McCullough of The Athletic did a really great profile on Darvish without actually speaking to Darvish, but just talking to people around him about that World Series really, really drove him nuts. That is still on the back of his mind. It was really, really tough for him after that just to sort of bounce back, and just knowing that he lost it like that, it was a really great piece, so I recommend that. It's from a few years back. But anywho, I thought he looked really good in this game overall. Not as many strikeouts as you like to see, but when we're talking about someone who's as old as Darvish is, I'm really just looking at, are you able to go deep into games, which he still clearly was able to. 6 innings against a very good team. So it's funny that against teams like Detroit and Seattle, he was not able to go as deep. Those teams don't have nearly as prolific an offense or just overall roster as the Astros, but he still stepped up big, and it was awesome. So shouts to Darvish. Really, really love when he does well against the Astros. And in general, by the way, the Padres have been very good against the Astros for years now. Dating back to 2020 when I was starting this podcast, they started their Grand Slam record breaking thing, the Grand Slam streak. They started that, I believe, against the Astros, and I believe it was Hosmer. Or no, I think they ended it against the Astros. Was that what it was? No, they started it against the Rangers, and then they played the Astros after that. And then Hosmer, I believe, in the first game, hit the one that eventually gave them the Grand Slam record. That was awesome, even if we do not like Eric Hosmer very much. But overall, 3 strikeouts. You'd like to see more, but again, with his age, I just like, he's going to be interesting for the playoffs. And if he's ramping up and if he's doing well against a team like this, maybe his next start might come against the White Sox or what have you, right? Like, we'll have to see. That's just really, really a good sign for this team, because for as much as we talked about yesterday that there are some players in the bullpen that do make me nervous, I think Jeremiah Estrada and Adrian Morejon and Yuki Matsui are the 3. Like, it's good to see if the Padres have some rotation depth of guys that look pretty sharp. We know that Dylan Cease is a possible guy that's going to be awesome in that series. Michael King, Joe Musgrove looks great, and now Yu Darvish. That just gives them so many options. Martin Perez being a guy that maybe can just be a piggyback starter. Might not need to be a piggyback starter now based on how Darvish looked last night. So really good news. And the rest of the Padres bullpen obviously is based on the score. It was very good. Jason Adam looking really sharp. 1 inning, gave up 1 hit. No walks, no strikeouts. Tanner Scott does give up 1 run, which frankly, that's okay. It was from Yordan Alvarez, who's pretty good. He's able to drive in Altuve. And then Robert Suarez comes in, 1, 2, 3, 8 pitches, gets it done. That was the most exciting thing. Again, Robert Suarez is good. I feel like I might have given off the vibe that I thought Robert Suarez wasn't like he was overrated. That's not what I'm saying. I just didn't know if he was an elite, like top 5 awesome closer. I didn't realize that because he doesn't get as many strikeouts as I would like. That's just my thing. But 2.55 ERA on the season. He's been mostly pretty electric throughout the whole year. I love his little, the coming out of the what is it called? Coming out of the bullpen song, the closer entrance thing. That's always a blast. Again, I've said this on record. I think every team should have something like that. The night game, the closer entrance. I don't care if it's the White Sox. Whoever the closer is, we should have something like that. I don't know. Add a little professional wrestling vibe to it. But that's just me. But let me tell you guys, that's just the pitching. We also got to talk about the offense and give you an update on Luis Arraez, who was kind of like both the hero, not in terms of like actually the one who produced the most runs, but in terms of like just having the craziest moment of the night. So we're going to talk about all of that, guys, in just a second. But first, I must talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you, here's the thing about Prize Picks, folks. On top of being the #1 daily fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members, all you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you get the winnings to roll in. On top of that, they've got a nice deal for you. Caleb Williams, you might have heard of him, his first overall pick for the Chicago Bears. Guess what? Through the month of September, 1 Caleb Williams passing yards gets you 1 win on Prize Pick every week for the month of December. That's right, only one prize passing yard. So it's basically automatic W's, at least 1 for September. That's really cool. So get in while that's still active. Don't miss it out. It ends when September ends. Wake him up when September ends, some would say. That was awful. But everybody also check out, they've got community tabs if you want to play with the community. They've got people like Drewski, Joe Budden, Sugar Sean O'Malley on the app doing their own stuff too, so you can be a part of that community. They've got all sorts of fun offers all the time. I imagine these guys are going to have something fun after the Caleb Williams things ends. So go check that out, guys. It is a blast with Prize Picks. They've got injury insurance, different flex play stuff. It's great. Go check it out, guys. So, you might be wondering, well, what's the deal, Javi? You always give us a deal. Well, of course I'm going to give you a deal. Come on now. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll instantly get $50 when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. And guess what? You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just giving you money for free just like that. So go check it out. PrizePicks, run your game. And just like that, folks, we are back, thriving and vibing into segment number 2 of the Locked On Padres podcast for today. Let's talk about the other things that occurred in today's game, folks. Okay, so here's the thing. Padres, not a lot of action to this one, just like Sunday's game, not a lot of action, but they did get it where it counts. First of all, Manny Machado, bottom of the first inning, and I will say, I was watching, I don't know if you guys saw the Falcons game last night, that was nuts, but I had like the Padres on my main laptop and whatnot. The game was on the TV, and it was just funny seeing Machado like had a big hit like almost at the same time there was a big play in the Falcons game, but I was like, oh man, that's just weird coincidence. But Manny Machado, bottom of the first inning, he gets the double that allows Jurickson Profar to score. Then bottom of the fourth inning, Jackson Merrill hitting another shot, just continues killing it. Jackson Merrill's incredible. I even see some of my friends that are like Yankee fans tweeting about him now. We're winning, guys. That's good. If even the New Yorkers are tweeting about it, the East Coast bias, if they're on our side, we're looking really good. Him hitting another home run in this one, and going, by the way, 2 for 3 overall in the game. I mean, he's been a monster. What is there to really say about him at this point? Basically, since the All-Star break, it looks like he's having, and we talked about this with Aram Layton from Just Baseball on a Prospects Guru. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that we've both come to an agreement on is that Merrill has had what usually happens in the second year, later in your career, that breakout when you find that other aspect of your game that improves. He's having it right now. I mean, we talked about this before. 986 OPS so far in 13 games in September, then 975 in August. And it's not like he was bad before that, but he wasn't quite this deadly, right? He had a great June. He had a 996 OPS in June, but him hitting for power like this is just unbelievable. And again, even if he has to work on, swinging at less pitches and whatnot, maybe drawing more walks, I should say, bottom line is he doesn't strike out nearly as much as you would think, right? He's just such a good overall hitter. This guy's going to finish with probably, I mean, the fact that he almost has as many home runs as Manny Machado is pretty nuts at 24. The fact that he's already up there in that is just insanely nuts. So shouts to Jackson Merrill. He hits a home run in this one to give the Padres the lead. And then in the bottom of the 8th inning, Jurickson Profar going deep as well. Love to see that. He hadn't hit for like a big hit in that regard in a little bit. 4 for 4 game from him, including a double and then the aforementioned home run. Awesome stuff. The double allowing him to score, by the way, from the Manny hit. So really great. Just genuinely, this offense, it feels like, I feel like I mentioned this before too. It feels like we have a new hero every day. Like, it always feels like someone new steps up. On Sunday, we got the 4 doubles from Donovan Solano or whatever it was. I don't have it in front of me. Let me see if I can pull that up. The 3 doubles in Saturday's game, I believe. Like, there's always someone new stepping up for this team. David Peralta has been clutch at points, right? Like, we've just had so much fun vibes this year. We talked about yesterday about how they've been winning close games more than ever. It's just like, I would like to pose you guys a question. If you knew that this season was going to happen in 2023, let's say 2023 hasn't started, but you knew somehow that the Padres would be this good, they would have a great rotation, they'd have a great bullpen, and they'd be one of the most clutch teams in baseball, and that Jackson Merrill would be this good, would you have been like, that is a fair trade-off for the nightmare of 2023? I'm like, we're getting to that point, and that's how fun it's been so far. But again, really great day overall. Last thing to talk about in terms of the offense is one Sir Luis Arraez, who goes 2 for 4 in this game. He did strike out, which was wild. I think it broke his plate appearance streak of no strikeouts of like 115 plate appearances. He'd only struck out like once or twice since the All-Star break. Like, he'd been on fire. 2 for 4 in this game. He does take a little bit of an injury. Back in the what's it called? Let me see if I can find the right inning. Was it the bottom of the 7th? No, I think it was earlier than that. I forgot exactly which inning it is, but late in the game, the Padres trying to take the lead on a hit. The Luis Arraez running home. Jason Hayward makes a heck of a throw, which frankly might have been, I might have pulled on Arraez there because Jason Hayward has been a really good defensive player for a very long time. And then also, it's worth noting that Luis Arraez isn't necessarily the fastest player that we've ever seen. And Jason Hayward's like a Gold Glove caliber player. That's basically why he's still in the game, is because he can still field really well. I don't know if I would have sent him there. He does one of the worst slides I've seen, Arraez. And it's like, it feels like he was trying to do almost like a hesitation slide. That doesn't make sense. Almost like slide, stop, and then jump over the tag. And then he goes down. And he clearly is in some pain. And it was really scary. Very, very scary. Because for him to just catch on fire, for him to finally be over this injury of his, and then for him to get hurt, Like, I literally tweeted last night, like, whatever the baseball gods need me to do to keep Luis Arraez healthy, like, I will do it. And it was really scary. And it was like such a dumb injury, too, that felt so self-inflicted, because I can't really describe it over audio, and in some cases video listeners. I can't really describe it very well. But again, he kind of like does this hesitation slide thing. Looks like he jammed himself a little bit. But he comes back and hits a double. That is ridiculous. Like, for him to be hurt, that's why, if you're watching on video, I put Arraez as a dog, because he absolutely is. Update from AJ Casfell. Luis Arraez jammed his right knee, sliding into home plate. Just inflammation, he says. He thinks he'll be ready to go tomorrow, as in today, but needs to wait and see. Asked how he was feeling post-game, Arraez smiled and said, "Mad, I struck out." You know what I mean? Like, just what a dog, and what an amazing killer mentality from him. Just awesome stuff from Luis Arraez. I think that one of the things about this team is that for the rest of the way, there's really nothing I have to learn about the offense. Luis Arraez was kind of the final missing piece. In the second half, I was a little bit wondering, would Jurickson Profar fall off a little bit? Xander Bogaerts is basically the only player where I'm like, I'd like to see more from him, because he's had moments, don't get me wrong. Like, he really has. He's been doing okay. He hit a home run the other day. But all in all, he's still a little bit of a consistent batter. What's great is that it does not seem to matter right now, right? Like, that's what's so incredible about him. But a 94 WRC plus is pretty rough, man. And he's not taking as many walks as I would like. So that's a little bit concerning. Even if he is hitting the ball a little bit better than he has in previous times, still his overall numbers on the season leave a lot to be desired. And it's not like he's getting super unlucky, too. Again, I think he's something to worry about for next year. Right, I think that's the bigger issue with Xander Bogaerts, is what is he going to do age-wise going forward. But for now, that's the only player that I'm feeling weird about. In general, this tweet from Alex Scott, though, last night, the Padres are 71-47 since May 1st, which is the best mark in all of baseball during that specific span since May. So it's not just the deadline. They have been just that good. And it's really something to behold. And I think we should be very excited about it. And just celebrate the fact that the Padres have the best vibes that we've seen in a long time. Heck, check this out. A story from Sammy Levitt last night. Albert Pujols was at the game last night, and his daughter, Esther, was celebrating her birthday in San Diego to see one of her favorite players, Manny Machado, who gifted her with a signed jersey and batting gloves. Awesome stuff for Manny, of course. I love seeing Manny. They show Manny interacting with kids sometimes, and he has such a fun vibe to him. Like, he gets a kick out of it. You know what I mean? So it's really, really cool. And I always love that from players. I'm always, as I imagine you listeners are, going to be a sucker for players that are just being super nice to kids. And you know that just makes their day. So love that very much. And if you're a kid watching this, maybe with your parents and whatnot, I hope you get to meet your favorite player and get signed gloves and stuff from Padres players, whoever it is, at some point in the future. That would be great. But all in all, great win. We've got one more thing we got to talk about, which is a question that I received in the mailbag yesterday, and we're going to revisit that. It's about the playoff rotation. Then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Padres vibes. But first, folks, let's talk about another one of our sponsors. That is the legendary, the impeccable, the sensational FanDuel, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the thing about FanDuel. You hear us talk about them a lot because they are, in fact, America's #1 sportsbook, and we have another offer for you. This time, it is now through September 22nd. So you've only got a few more days of this bad boy. So get in while you can. Only 5 more days. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you want to watch that crazy Falcons game that I watched last night, well, last night would have been national, but if you want to watch the Falcons in general, who might be a lot of fun this year for all you fantasy owners, you could check that out. If you want to check out the Packers, if you want to see how they're going to do, if whatever is out of market for you in San Diego, if you want to watch the Bears, stuff like that. For me on the East Coast, if I want to watch the Chargers, or I want to watch the Rams, or if I want to watch the Seahawks or whatever, that's what YouTube TV can do for you. And again, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So great deal. And again, bet now $5 through September 22nd, and you can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket just to see how you like it. So go check that out, guys. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sports book. Go check it out. And just like that, folks, we are thriving and vibing into the final segment of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about some questions. This one coming from one Sir Tony Sue yesterday, folks. This is from the mailbag. We didn't get to get into this one because I was talking way too much during yesterday's mailbag, but he had some thoughts on the Padres rotation that I thought I would share. He commented this on YouTube. As for the rotation, by my count, Darvish pitched 1 out of up to 5 starts to get back in form. Until Darvish can get back, you still pencil him in as the number 1 starter because he has more tools, the experience, and the makeup of a number 1. And best do the job. If Musgrove can fix what went wrong with his past start, I might give him a slight edge over Cease, but it's close. Similarly, if Cease can fix what went wrong the last start, he might be assigned number 2, but Cease has been producing erratic starts the whole year between brilliant performances. Whatever Cease might try to do differently, he's already had plenty of chances. Maybe Perez gets the 4th spot. Maybe not. He has a lot more experience than any of the other options, including King, who probably leads the list of pitching their first year as starters. Perez ceiling, Perez might be more consistent, but doesn't have the high ceiling of the other pitchers. As long as these young pitchers don't encounter problems, they're great. But when situations happen with runners on base and various outs, there doesn't seem to be a plan for attacking the batter a certain way. The young Padres pitchers all pitch great with no one on base, but when that changes often, you'll see no adjustment and batters are pitched as though the bases were empty. The Padres should have some good pitching in another year or two, but it's a big ask for them to do well this year. One thing I'll say that as promising as the top 2 pitchers in the farm system were, it's okay to lose them for the current crop of pitchers that spent significant time at the Major League roster this year and hope to see them with the team for longer. So here's what I'll say. I do disagree with you in the sense of Darvish. I still think that Darvish is the type of starter who could get blown up. And I still like him in the postseason, and he has a lot of experience. But to me, the number 1 starter is Joe Musgrove, because I just think that him being back, and we've seen signs of not just his performance, but also the fact that he is a guy that has his velocity back, right? He's hitting, he's also had enough dynamite performances just almost on the level of a, Michael King as of late, right? And Michael King, I do think that there is a little bit of a worry for him, which is why he wouldn't be my game 1 starter, that little bit of a lack of experience. And frankly, a lack of experience of him pitching this far into the season, right? Like this many innings. He hasn't really done before. He says that he's totally fine and he's like, we good. You know what I mean? I love the pitching coaches and all that stuff. We're good. But I think that is the reason he won't be my number 1. I think it's going to be Musgrove. I could see Darvish number 2. I think if Darvish works his way back, that's still a guy you kind of want, especially in a big game. And let's say in the wild card series, if they were to lose game 1, there is a feeling of like, hey, we trust Darvish. That has been our guy before. He's done well for the Padres in the postseason. And in general, he just has so much experience. And the fact that, like Tony just commented, he has so many different pitches that he can go to. So it's not like he's someone that is, unless there's like specific players that I'm unfamiliar with, a specific team numbers that I'm unfamiliar with. The fact of the matter is that I agree with Tony, because Darvish has so many different pitches and styles that I think he can go for that make him not necessarily a plus depending on the matchup, but definitely not a negative either. And I think that does really, really matter. So I'm really looking forward to that and seeing how it all kind of shakes up this rotation. I do disagree a little bit with your point, though, on trading the pitching prospects being fine. I don't necessarily know how that's going to go going forward. They don't really have any pitching prospects anymore that are all that exciting. Now, here's the hope, is that they are hoping that Cease, King are back. Maybe they extend one of the 2 guys, and then you feel a little bit better about the Padres pitching going forward. But I am still worried about that. And Martin Perez, we talked about this before. He's looked really good. 2.73 ERA since he's been with the Padres, but is worth noting, as I brought up on yesterday's show, yes, he's had a slight uptick in his strikeout rate. He does look like he's making some mechanical changes. We love you, Ruben Niebla, right? But overall, he's still got a 4.87 FIP over that time. So it does suggest that while he has been better for the Padres, and I think that number might be a little bit inflated, still, it does tell me that this guy might get absolutely torched if he's going up against good teams, because he might be getting just a tad bit lucky at 33 years old with some of that stuff. And it was 2.72 ERA. I was 0.1 off. How about that? 2.72 ERA with the Padres so far. So again, that's just how I'm feeling about that. But overall, I do agree. I think that Darvish has that thing. You know what I mean? Darvish does have that experience, and I think that's going to matter. And I am with you also on the sense that, young pitchers and experienced pitchers, once the runners are on base, I don't throw the stats out the window. I don't want to hear this nonsense when it comes to baseball playoffs. That's the beautiful part about baseball playoffs, is this guys make names for themselves, or they make bad names for themselves. Look at Clayton Kershaw, best pitcher of the generation, can't show up in the postseason, right? Justin Verlander, low key, not all that great in the postseason either. He's had good moments. Don't get me wrong. I think he was actually pretty sharp the last time they were in the postseason. But through I mean, he's been in the league for so long. He hasn't been as great in the postseason, right? So in general, I think that it's worth just kind of bringing this up and saying, there's a lot of interesting questions for this Padres rotation come playoffs. I stick by my prediction that Musgrove will be the game 1 starter, though. I really do. I think they trust him to get the quality start. I think Cease is going to be game 2, potentially, but it does depend on how back Yu Darvish is. So that's what I see, and I would not like to see, personally, Martin Perez, unless it's like one of these guys gets lit up and they bring in Perez in like the 3rd or 4th inning. That I'm okay with. But in general, I just think that this is the type of pitcher. What do we complain about on the show a lot? That there's all these teams that have these fun little journeyman players. They don't spend money and they find a way to get a gamble or a bargain, I should say, on one of these players. And guess what happens come playoff time? That player who's having a cutesy little breakout or one-hit wonder season, they get absolutely torched in the postseason, right? That just seems to be what happens. Those type of teams that are built that way. So Perez, to me, might be a guy that gets loved. That doesn't mean he has no value. Let me be very clear. He's helped us through the second half, and he's also a guy that could still be useful in the playoffs. I'm just saying counting on him because of his low ERA since then, I think could be a mistake. But overall, I agree with Tony's breakdown. Last thing I want to bring up. There was a tweet from a Padres Twitter legend, at Giannis Antetokounmpo on Twitter, Tommy real name. He said, I've watched some miserable, and I mean miserable seasons. This year's team has provided so many memorable moments. We don't know what the end result will be, but if you can't get behind this version, you're doing it wrong. Take a step back and appreciate what's in front of you. And I wanted to bring that up because I think that one of the things that we do as sports fans, and I've been a fan of sports for a long time, right? But it often and understandably so, I don't necessarily think that it's bad to be like, winning makes me happy. That's what we want. That's what it's about. The Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. That whole thing, that's totally fine. But I do think that sometimes, because of various outlets, various ways that we consume media, the ways that it's being portrayed, that it's become very myopic. And it's become a little bit too much of win or lose and not appreciating everything else. The first takeification of sports media discourse, where it's, that guy didn't show up, he was a choker and all this stuff, when really these are team sports and you can't really go by that, unless we're talking about boxing and tennis, sports like that. But in general, I look at this as, it is more, as someone who's been watching sports for a long time and someone who's been a fan of some miserable teams, one of them I'm not really supposed to talk about on this podcast, the Chargers, and then, rooting for Chris Paul, right? Like, that was my favorite player growing up, and he never wins. The Chargers always lose. And then the Padres, you've got them too. For the most part, through my life, the teams that I root for lose, and you're mostly going to be miserable if you appreciate sports in that way. I recommend everyone checking out, I've said this before on this podcast, the first episode of a show called Sports Night, in which a character basically is becoming a little bit, not radicalized, a little bit disillusioned with how sports works. And then there's some great thing he's never seen before that happens. And then he starts getting excited and remembers why he loves sports. I think that, here's how I'll break it down. I think that the Padres, they simply aren't the only team that's been through it, right? They have not just been the only thing that's been through it. Sure, they've had their bad moments, right? This is a team that hadn't made the playoffs since 06. This is a team that hadn't made a World Series since 98. And the previous time they made it was 84, right? They have not had a rich history. The fact that Manny Machado just broke the all-time Padres home run record already, it feels like, of what was it, like 160 from Nate Colbert, it shows you this is not a franchise known for winning. And it's been through it. Like I said, it's been through the ringer of massive L's, memification at time, and just overall dread. But one thing that they aren't one of the only teams that's been through that, but one thing they are is one of the few teams that has changed in ways that are bigger than wins and losses. An organizational, philosophical change, if I may. I think we should appreciate, like he says, like my boy Tommy says on Twitter, I think we should appreciate the Padres for everything else. I think we should appreciate that it's very rare for teams to make such a pivot like this, with new ownership saying spending money is great, with ownership that says, let's make the Padres fun. Let's make them a blast of a team. We have personality, and we've got a GM that's willing to trade at any time, and it's resulted in a more fan morale being boosted than you've ever seen. Basically, overall with this team, there are teams out there that do better than the Padres. But there are very few teams that can change like this. It just doesn't happen. You look across sports, the Oakland A's, the Chicago White Sox, the Chicago Bears up until this year have been mostly miserable, right? You can look at the Charlotte Hornets, right? The Washington Wizards. There are so many teams that have been just bad in terms of the losing. The Padres have also been bad, but the unique thing about them is that they have all this new stuff going for them. It's a philosophical, organizational vibe change. Vibes above replacement, some might even say. So to me, I recommend everyone just appreciating this season for what it is. I don't know what they're going to do in the playoffs. They might lose first round, right? They might. They totally might. But remember all the memories they've given you, all the good moments they've given you, how fun it's been to root for Jackson Merrill this year, how even more fun it's been to root for Jurickson Profar, who was literally the worst qualified player in baseball, and he's all vibes. And in year 10, a guy who was a little bit of a failed prospect, right? Like, because of all those injuries early on in his career, to him be the starting left fielder in the All-Star game, watching Michael King be great, the fact that the Padres did well from losing Juan Soto in terms of just what they received in return, Dylan Cease throwing a no-hitter, the walk-off in Luis Arraez's first home game for the Padres against the Dodgers, the walk-off from Donovan Solano, Fernando Tatis Jr.'s unbelievable plays in the outfield, and that home run that put them ahead of the Cubs, making the 8-run comeback, Jackson Merrill's heroics throughout the years, the anything that I bring up with this team, I think that you should appreciate it for more than that. I really do. And if your whole thing is just, wait, we lost in the playoffs, that's it, I'm upset, I just don't know personally if that's the way that we should be consuming sports. But I digress. You do you, because it's free. We're in a free country, at least from what I'm told. So do your thing. Do your thing, everybody. But that's just me. I think we should all appreciate the Padres for what they've given us this year, and just in general what they could keep giving us based on what I mentioned, the organizational change, that this is a team that's always going to be in it, that they're going to be trading. It just doesn't happen like this. The Golden State Warriors are one of the few teams I can think of where, like, they became a S-tier organization, and it looks like that may stay there, right? The San Antonio Spurs, in the late 90s with the Admiral, I forgot his name, and then Tim Duncan, stuff like that. Teams that, like, change and are just great. New England Patriots, we hate them. We hate Boston on this podcast, but, like, guess what? They were a joke before Tom Brady showed up. And then they became this banner of excellence for years. So sometimes it's not only about the winning. It's about your team and vibe just changing in such a way that makes you just happy to be a Padres fan. So appreciate the little moments and appreciate the way the rest of the season goes down. And with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Send me more of your questions and whatnot. I'll answer throughout the week. And of course, be sure to save your really juicy, great questions for next week's mailbag. We'll be recapping tomorrow's game, as well as we may have a special guest. It's either going to be tomorrow's game or the game after. I don't know which one exactly yet, but a special guest. Someone with the Padres organization, in fact. Oh, yeah. How about that for a tease? So until next time, everybody, stay safe. And, of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies. Take care.